Deep in the heart of the countryside, a quiet farm stood, steeped in tradition and hard work. But on this otherwise serene morning, the air crackled with tension. The sun barely peeked over the horizon, cloaking the land in shadows, when a grumble of engines broke the stillness. A gang of bikers, clad in leather and defiance, roared down the dirt road, riding towards the thick wooden farm gate. Jake Thompson, the farmer, was up early as always. He pulled on his worn boots, the soles thick with stories of seasons past. As he stepped out onto his porch, coffee in hand, he squinted against the rising sun. The sound of engines grew louder, thundering like an ominous storm. Jake knew every sound that echoed across his land. This wasn't the usual rustle of wildlife or the gentle cluck of his hens. No, this was a challenge. He set his coffee down, his heart racing against his ribcage. The bikers pulled up, a ragged line of leather jackets and tattoos clustered around their roaring machines. They were a sight to behold, with their tattoos stretched across their arms like badges of honor, faces hardened by life on the road, surrounded by a sense of raw, reckless camaraderie. The lead biker, a towering figure with a beard like a thicket, shouted, trying to drown out the morning. Jake stepped off his porch, standing tall, his hands calloused but steady. "On my land, it ain't," he replied, his voice carrying the kind of authority that could only come from years of nurturing the earth, battling storms and battling doubt. Laughter erupted from the bikers, harsh and jagged. They encircled him, their bikes casting long, dark shadows across the grass. "You think a farmer can stand against us?" The air swelled with conflict, palpable and electrifying. A small breeze rustled the cornfields behind Jake, the ears of corn standing tall, witnesses to the showdown. He trusted his instincts. He'd faced tougher storms than this. Jake took a step closer, his defiance simmering like the morning sun. "This farm has been in my family for generations." Once more, laughter erupted, but it had a nervous edge to it. The bikers exchanged glances, the bravado starting to fade as they registered the fire in Jake's eyes, a flame ignited by years of grit and resilience. But they had numbers. The leader stepped forward, crossing his arms over his chest. "You'll regret this." "I don't need you to play nice," Jake replied, his voice steady, carrying a calmness that cut through the rising storm. "You think cowards can take what they want just because they ride fast?" A silence fell. The bikers shifted, their scoffs turning to murmurs. They weren't used to being challenged, especially not by a solitary farmer armed with just his will and a pitchfork leaning against the porch. "Look around," Jake gestured towards the vast fields that surrounded them. "Do you see just land? This place holds memories." The leader's bravado faltered, his brow furrowing. He reached for a cigarette, lighting it as if the fire could ignite something in his crew, something bold and fearsome. He took a drag, and the moment seemed to stretch, the world holding its breath. "Even if you feel you have a claim," he coughed, smoke billowing like dark clouds. The air hung heavy with intensity, and Jake felt a simmering rage bubble within him. He thought of the late nights, the freezing winters, and the blood, sweat, and tears that had shaped this place. He hadn't fought for this dirt to see it taken by men who lived only for the thrill of the ride. With that, he stepped off his porch entirely, grabbing for the pitchfork. The bikers exchanged nervous glances. This wasn't how they expected the day to play out. Bold, yes, but they hadn't anticipated the heart of a farmer who would fight for his land as fiercely as they did for their freedom. Jake could feel the pull of history behind him, the roots of countless generations. He brandished the pitchfork, the sun glinting off the steel, a symbol of his unwavering resolve. He taunted, squaring his shoulders. "I'll fight for every inch. I know this land like the back of my hand. You want to fight?" The leader dropped his cigarette, slowly raising his hands in mock surrender, a smirk still plastered on his face. "You've got guts, old man." Jake's heart thudded. He saw not just the bikers before him, but the shadows of countless struggles, neighbors lost to corporate greed, small farms swallowed up by giant operations. This wasn't just about his land. This was about standing against the tides that threatened to wash away everything he held dear. "Let's make this clear," Jake said, his voice a thunderous calm now, cutting through their nonchalance. "You want a war, you'll find it." Silence wrapped around them, thick as fog. A reckoning hovered over the farm, and tensions danced between the two sides like fireflies caught in a summer storm. The bikers huddled closer together, whispering amongst themselves. Jake kept his grip tight on the pitchfork, ready for whatever was to come. The leader stepped back, narrowing his eyes, calculating. 1 week, he finally said, we'll be back. There will be more of us, more engines. Come back whenever you want, Jake shot back. With that, the bikers revved their engines, the sound roaring into the morning like a thunderclap. They peeled away, leaving Jake standing on his porch, heart hammering in his chest, resolute. They thought they'd scared him, but deep down, they'd ignited a fire not easily snuffed out. As the sun climbed higher, spilling golden light over the fields, Jake took a deep breath, filling his lungs with purpose. The farm felt alive beneath his feet. The wind sang through the corn, urging him forward. He wasn't just a farmer, he was a protector. Days passed slowly, turning into a week of preparation. Jake fortified his resolve. He knew he had to gather more than just his pitchfork. He combed through the barn, pulling out old machinery, tools, anything that could help him stand his ground. With every swing of the shovel, every creak of the tractor, he felt the world around him soothe and strengthen his spirit. Neighbors who'd once nodded at him in passing began to lean on the fence, watching as word spread of the approaching bikers. They knew Jake was a man of quiet strength, and the fight for his farm became a rallying cry. They called out, offering tools, labor, and their support. One by one, they stepped forward, brought by the story of a farmer who refused to yield. Jake's spirits soared. He remembered the stories of the old men before him, tales of how the land endured because of community, of unity against outside threats. With each passing day, more faces appeared, young and old, determined as the soil itself to stand firm. The bikers returned, a week later, roaring down the dirt road with an army of engines. This time the confrontation felt different. The ground trembled not just with the sound of their machines, but with the might of a community standing behind Jake. They lined up in formation, leather and steel flashing against the sunlight. But as Jake looked around, he felt not fear but solidarity. His neighbors lined the road, each face determined, each heart thumping with resolve. Lead biker stepped forward, confusion flickering in his eyes. "What's this?" Jake turned, glaring at the daunting gang before him, his neighbors silent but sturdy beside him. "This isn't just my fight anymore. You didn't just come for a farm, did you?" The bikers were momentarily stilled, confusion shifting into apprehension. They may have felt invincible on their roaring bikes, but they hadn't counted on the power of a unified heart and a shared purpose. Jake stepped forward, his chin raised high. "You see, you're not just facing me, you're up against my entire community. We won't be bullied, we won't be pushed around." The tension hung thick like the weight of a storm about to break. The lead biker stuttered for words, his bravado melting under the shared strength of Jake's neighbors. The roars of engines calmed and the crew shifted restlessly. Jake's voice pierced the thick air. "We're not backpedaling, we're standing strong." A flicker of doubt sparked in the leader's eyes and the air crackled with uncertainty. Slowly, the bikers exchanged glances, the hesitation spilling like water between them. Finally, the leader stepped back, almost in disbelief. "You haven't seen the last of us," he spat, his voice sinking into a low growl. But cold air surrounded him, cloaking the fierceness in uncertainty. As they mounted their bikes, revving engines, Jake felt a wave of triumph. Each roar of the bikers' engines grew distant, quieter, retreating down the dirt road. And in that moment, a haunting quiet fell over the farm, a gentle breeze stirring through the corn. Jake turned to his community, feeling the weight of a shared victory wrap around them like a warm embrace. They had stood their ground together, a mighty force against the whirlwind of uncertain threats. The sun dipped low, casting a golden glaze over the fields. With hands clasped together, neighbors shared stories of the day and laughter rang between them, vibrant and strong. It wasn't just about winning the land. It was about creating a community that knew how to fight for what really mattered. Jake glanced around, his heart swelling with pride and gratitude. They were farmers, each of them tied to the earth, resilient as the soil that nourished their crops. They had faced down fear, joined in heart, and fought for their honor. And just like that, the farm stood, not just as a piece of land, but as a testament to the strength of a united spirit. Together, they'd pushed back against darkness, banding together against every storm. They'd reminded each other and themselves, exactly what they were fighting for. Jake Thompson stood on his porch, cradling a steaming mug of coffee as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon. The world around him was still, save for the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant call of a rooster heralding the start of a new day. But beneath that calm surface, a storm was brewing. Suddenly, in the stillness, a low rumble filled the air, growing louder until it snaked through the quiet like a predator on the hunt. A gang of motorcycles sped down the dirt road, clouding the morning with dust and engine noise. Jake's heart raced. This wasn't just any group of bikers. Word had spread about them. They had a reputation, and it was grim. The lead biker, a massive figure decked in leather, snarled as he approached. He called out, his voice gravelly and thick. Jake's blood ran cold. His family had worked this land for generations. It had been molded by sweat, blood, and unwavering determination. "Not on my watch," he replied, his voice steady even as the electrical tension crackled in the air. The biker laughed, his crew behind him sneering, reveling in the spectacle. They were a sight to behold, clad in dark leathers, tattoos snaking across their arms like stories carved into flesh. They were loud, brash, and filled with bravado, a whirlwind of chaos. But Jake wasn't intimidated. He stepped down from the porch, the rough boards creaking beneath his weight, his calloused hands clenched at his sides. "You don't scare me. This farm has been in my family since the Civil War." The tension thickened. The bikers huddled closer together, weighing their options. The farm was secluded, a small patch of earth surrounded by sprawling fields, yet it burned with history. Jake could feel the spirits of his ancestors rising alongside him, giving him strength. The lead biker, who Jake would later know as Bear, tilted his head, sizing him up. "But you're just one man." Jake straightened his back, grounding himself in the moment. With that, the bikers erupted into raucous laughter, their voices sharp and cutting. But somewhere in the back, uncertainty flickered among them. They boasted about their power, but they hadn't encountered the resolve that came from generations of farmers and their unwavering connection to the land. "Listen, old man," Bear said, his voice lower now, smooth like oil. "We're not here to chat. We want this place. We'll give you until sunset tomorrow to pack your bags and get lost." Jake felt the weight of those words. How dare they with their roaring engines and hollow threats? They thought they could instill fear, break him. But the truth was, he had faced worse storms than this. Standing against the elements, he'd fought through droughts and floods, each struggle only deeply entrenching his love for this land. "I won't be leaving," Jake stated, his tone calm but filled with a fierce determination. With a wave, the bikers mounted their bikes, tires kicking up dirt. But even as they pulled away, their laughter echoed unsettlingly. Jake watched them fade down the road, feeling that volatile mix of fear and resolve. He wasn't just fighting for a piece of land. He was defending a lifetime of memories, hard work, and hope. The night was long and restless. Jake tossed and turned in his bed, the shadows of doubt creeping in like intruders. What if they came back? What if they brought more bikers? The weight of all those possibilities sat heavy on his chest. At dawn, he rose early, moving through the familiar routine of farm chores. He checked on the animals, ensuring they were safe, and collected the eggs, feeling the smooth, cool shells beneath his fingers. Each small act filled him with purpose, a reminder of his commitment to this place. By noon, the fear had simmered down, replaced by a spark of determination. He needed allies. Friends had always stood by him through thick and thin. So he hopped in his old pickup truck, its engine roaring to life, and drove into town, seeking support. As he entered the local diner, the familiar smell of coffee and bacon greeted him. A crowd of farmers filled the booths, each one sharing stories and laughter, their faces creased with the kinship that comes from years of shared toil under the sun. Called out Martha, a widow who could run circles around most men when it came to farming. "You all right?" Jake took a deep breath, letting the warmth of the diner seep into him. "I've got a situation. A gang of bikers is trying to take my farm." The laughter faded, replaced by concerned whispers. The love for the land united them, and their eyes widened. They understood what was at stake. Martha asked, determination flashing in her eyes. "Community, unity. We need to show them we're not afraid," Jake declared, and with each word, a fire grew within him. Word of Jake's struggle spread quickly through town. Farmers rallied, each one bringing skills, tools, and stories that pressed them to stand tall against the odds. They held a meeting in the barn where the walls would witness their resolve. As the sun dipped low, casting golden hues through the barn's windows, every face turned to Jake. "We're all in this together," he said, scanning their eyes. "We've always stood side by side on this land." The air thrummed with energy. Neighbors pledged their support, promising to be there when the bikers returned. It became a night of shared determination, a testament to the power found in a community willing to protect what was theirs. The next day felt different. As the sun rose, so did Jake's confidence. He knew he wasn't just a lone warrior. He had a battalion behind him. Together, they worked to fortify the farm, building barriers where needed, preparing themselves mentally for what might come. As the evening approached, the atmosphere swelled. They had made their stand, believing they could fend off the impending storm. When the sound of roaring engines finally echoed in the distance, Jake stepped forward, flanked by his neighbors, standing together like solid pillars against the approaching tide. The bikers appeared, a cloud of arrogance revving their engines. Bear led the pack, his grin wide as he dismounted. "Looks like you're still here, old man." But Jake stood tall, meeting Bear's gaze with steady eyes. Behind him, the farmers held their breath, courage brimming in the air like a spark ready to ignite. Bear paused, noticing the gathering of support. He hadn't anticipated this. The laughter died, and for the first time, uncertainty clouded the bikers' faces. "We're not alone," Jake said simply, lifting his pitchfork like a banner, a symbol of his resolve. "And neither are you." The bikers exchanged glances, doubt creeping into their camaraderie. The power of the crowd was palpable. The living, breathing unity formed a wall, unshakable and resolute. "Get out," Bear said, his bravado faltering, but Jake held firm. "No, you think you can run over people just because you ride fast. You don't understand the heart of this community." The silence wrapped around them, thick and heavy. The bikers shuffled nervously, their confidence dwindling like flames at dusk. Bear's smirk faltered as he looked around, finally realizing their intimidation tactics had fallen flat. "Fine," he snorted, feigning indifference, but Jake saw the vulnerability behind the bravado. "We'll let you have this one." With that, the bikers turned away, their engines rumbling reluctantly as they pulled back down the dirt road, leaving behind a dust cloud that hung like a faded memory. Jake exhaled, glancing around at the faces of his neighbors, relief flooding through him. The victory was sweet and hard-earned. They had fought back against the odds, standing strong as a community. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange hue over the fields, they celebrated. Laughter punctured the air, stories of bravery shared like treasures. They were farmers, yes, but they were also warriors of the land, a family bound not by blood, but by the battles they chose to fight together. Jake looked out over the fields, the land glowing in the twilight. Each blade of grass whispered tales of resilience. He thought of generations that had come before him, their spirits woven into the very soil underfoot. And there, amidst the joy and camaraderie, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace. They had faced darkness, and together they had pushed back the tide, fiercely defending what they valued most: the farm, their heritage, and the bonds that had forged them into something invincible. In the heart of a quiet farm, amidst the echoes of laughter and unity, Jake knew they had won more than just a battle. They had preserved the spirit of community, resilient as the land they cherished. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden hue over the cornfields as Jake Thompson leaned against the railing of his porch, coffee steaming in his hands. The air was crisp, filled with a quiet that felt sacred on his small family farm. Everything was as it should be. Birds chirped, the rustle of leaves whispered secrets of the coming day. But beneath that calm, something ominous was stirring. A heavy rumble pierced the morning stillness, growing louder until it thundered through the fields like an approaching storm. Jake squinted down the long dirt road, and a knot formed in his stomach. His gut told him trouble was coming. Then they appeared, a gang of bikers, their leather jackets glinting in the sunlight, tattoos decorating their arms like badges of honor. They rode in a tight cluster, engines roaring, dust swirling behind them like a dark omen. Jake recognized the faces. They were the kind of men who thrived on chaos, always hungry for a conquest. Jake had heard rumors about them, how they claimed territory and intimidated anyone who dared to defy them. But this was different. This was his land. His family had worked this farm for generations. It was their legacy. Jake called out, genuine disbelief lacing his tone. He stood firm, the weight of his family's history grounding him. The lead biker, a hulking man known as Bear, dismounted his bike with a swagger that screamed arrogance. "This is our spot now, old man." Laughter erupted from the crew, harsh and mocking. Jake felt the heat rise in his chest, but he held his ground, planting his feet into the earth beneath him. Bear stepped closer, a smirk plastered across his rugged face. "You think you can just stand here and tell us what to do? Not if I have anything to say about it," Jake shot back, the defiance bubbling up now. "This isn't just land. This is my home, my family's history." The bikers exchanged glances, their confidence wavering slightly. Jake felt a surge of pride. This was his territory, and he wasn't going down without a fight. They might be bigger and louder, but his roots ran deeper. Bear chuckled, but it faltered. "We'll give you until sundown tomorrow." With that, the gang mounted their bikes, engines roaring back to life, rattling Jake's bones as they tore away down the dirt road, leaving a cloud of dust and uncertainty in their wake. Jake returned to his porch, the weight of their threats heavy on his heart. The morning quiet lay shattered, replaced by a tempest brewing inside him. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, so did his resolve. He knew he had to protect his land. He had to push back. Jake's mind raced as night fell over the farm. He paced his kitchen, heart pounding like a drum in his chest. What would he do? How would he defend what was rightfully his against the wave of intimidation? At that moment, he thought of the spirit of his ancestors, the farmers who had tilled this land through droughts, floods, and endless hardships. He could feel them beside him, lending their strength. He wasn't just fighting for a plot of land, he was fighting for a legacy. Sleep did not come easily, his thoughts twisting around the bikers' threats like a twisting vine choking the life out of his peace. The weight of their menace sat hard on his shoulders, and every creak of the house seemed amplified by his anxiety. When dawn broke, he swung his legs over the edge of the bed, resolve coursing through him like electricity. He had a plan. He would gather his community, his neighbors, the people who knew the soul of this land and would stand beside him. After a quick breakfast, he climbed into his old pickup truck and drove into town, the engine sputtering but reliable. As he entered the diner, the familiar smell of coffee and greasy breakfasts greeted him. A group of farmers sat around a table, their laughter filling the room with a sense of camaraderie that soothed Jake's soul. Martha, the local widow, waved him over. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Jake took a deep breath, summoning his courage. "I need your help. A gang of bikers is trying to take my farm." The chatter in the diner fell silent, eyes snapping to him. Jake recalled their faces, the rough laughter, and the arrogance that dripped from their words. "I can't do this alone." Billy, a farmer with hands as rough as his demeanor, scoffed. Each farmer began to speak up, their voices rising in solidarity. They began to share their own stories of battles against corporations trying to swallow small farms whole, and suddenly the room buzzed with the energy of unity. "We're stronger together," Martha said, her eyes flashing with determination. Each pledge they made, every promise to stand together, ignited a flame of hope in Jake's heart. They brainstormed strategies, weapons of defense, and ways to show the bikers they wouldn't stand down. Each suggestion felt like a building block, fortifying the wall of their resolve. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Jake felt a surge of adrenaline. They worked tirelessly, reinforcing boundaries, gathering tools, and fortifying their spirits. They shared stories, laughter echoing under the barn's wooden beams, binding them all in a shared purpose. When the evening fell black, he gathered everyone around. "Listen, if they want to fight, they'll get one, but we'll show them who they're dealing with." Nods went around the circle, each face filled with determination. They would stand vigilant beside him, a united front against the threats lingering in the distance. Yesterday, they had been individual farmers. Today, they were warriors. As the sun climbed to greet the new day, the air shimmered with anticipation. Jake and his neighbors prepared for the bikers' inevitable return, calmly solidifying their positions. The farm looked different. the spirit of unity transforming the place into something formidable. The old barn now felt like a fortress, each piece of equipment standing at the ready. The sound of engines roared again in the distance, carrying with it a storm that darkened the sky. Tension snaked through the crowd as they lined up at the edge of the farm, Jake at the forefront. The bikers approached, the cloud of dust swirling around them, and in that moment every farmer stood taller, brimming with purpose. Bear dismounted, an unfamiliar glint of unease flashing in his eyes. He seemed more cautious this time, the laughter dimmed, replaced by the heavy weight of reality. Jake stepped forward, pitchfork in hand, his grip steady. "We're not alone." The bikers exchanged glances, uncertainty creeping in. Bear glanced at his crew and the bravado began to falter. "The easy way is to turn around and leave," Jake shot back, his voice firm, toneless. "You think you can rule with fear? This is our home." "Guys, maybe we should split," one of the younger bikers suggested, the bravado sapping out of him. Bear's expression hardened, but Jake saw the cracks forming in their confidence. He felt the solidarity of his neighbors behind him, their presence a shield against the storm they faced. "You don't get to decide what happens here." The silence stretched, heavy as the sky above. Uneasy murmurs rolled through the bikers. The community Jake had built stood resilient, a wall of farmers who had come together to protect what was theirs. As Bear continued to weigh his options, the faces of farmers behind Jake lit with an unshakable resolve. "There's no turning back," Jake said, his voice resolute. Bear eyed the crowd, grumbling but uncertain. "Maybe this is a fight you don't want," shouted Billy, stepping forward with his own pitchfork. Just like that, the atmosphere shifted. The unity exuded a palpable strength, the energy electrified by a shared purpose. Fingers twitched, eyes darting among the bikers, and Jake sensed the fear weaving its way into the gang's bravado. The weight of their decisions had shifted, and for the first time, doubt lingered among them. With a defeated growl, Bear turned, signaling his crew to retreat. "You win this time," he spat, anger simmering beneath the surface as they climbed back on their bikes. As the engines roared back to life, Jake felt a rush of exhilaration surge through him. They were leaving, and it wasn't the fear of retaliation. It was respect for what they had witnessed, a community rising to defend their land. As the bikers rolled over the horizon, Jake turned to his neighbors, the cheers bursting forth like fireworks. The tension that had weighed so heavily on them moments before began to dissipate into a sea of relief and triumph. Jake stood among his friends, each one embodying a fierce pride. He felt a swell of gratitude in his heart for the bonds forged in battle, for the community that had risen to defend not just his farm but their legacies. Together, they had pushed back against the tide of grinding fear and intimidation, reclaiming their narrative. They had transformed a looming storm into a celebration of togetherness, a reminder of what truly mattered. As the sun dipped low in the sky, painting everything in warm hues of orange and gold, Jake turned toward the fields that had witnessed every struggle, joy, and hardship. In that moment, he realized the battle had been won, not just for the land, but for the very essence of community itself. And as laughter filled the air, echoing across the fields, he knew they had created not just a fortress, but a family fortified by love, courage, and unwavering resolve. They would face every storm together, for they understood the heart of what it meant to belong. In a world increasingly filled with darkness, they had found their light together. Jake Thompson stood on the porch of his farm, the sun casting a warm glow over the cornfield swaying in the morning breeze. It was peaceful, the kind of morning he cherished. Birds chirped and the air smelled fresh with promise. But in the distance, a sound began to creep in deep and rumbling like thunder rolling across the sky. His heart sank as he recognized it. The unmistakable growl of motorcycle engines, rising in intensity and urgency. Adrenaline surged through him and he gripped the railing, his knuckles turning white. He had heard stories. Bikers had been known to roam this part of the countryside, seeking to claim land as if it were theirs. But this was more than just land. It was his family's legacy, inherited through sweat and hard work for generations. As the bikers approached, a cloud of dust curled behind them, swirling like smoke from a fire. Jake's thoughts raced. Were they really here to intimidate him? Did they really think they could just roll onto his property and take it? The lead rider, the largest of them all, pulled into view. His beard was thick, and his face bore tattoos that told stories of rebellion and defiance. The biker shouted as he dismounted, leaving the roar of engines behind. "Get ready to surrender this place." The laughter that followed was raucous and brutal. Jake felt his heart pound like a drum, but he stood firm, planting his feet into the earth beneath him. "You've got it all wrong. This is my land." With that, a hush fell over the gang. For a brief moment, they seemed unsure, surprised by Jake's fierce response. He could feel the weight of his family's history behind him, echoes of ancestors who fought for the very soil he stood on. These weren't just crops and fields, they were memories, hardships, and triumphs woven together into his very being. Bear, the lead biker, stepped closer. He spoke low, his voice like gravel. "We'll give you until sunset tomorrow." The threat hung in the air, thick and menacing. With a flick of his wrist, Bear turned, the gang revving their engines in unison, a cacophony of sound as they tore away, leaving Jake standing there still, rooted to the ground. The sun was setting as Jake retreated to the safety of his home. Inside, the silence echoed, broken only by the hum of his thoughts. Every creak of the house felt heavy with anxiety. Would they really come back? Could he fight them off? The thought of losing his farm gnawed at him like a relentless predator. He had not just inherited land, he had inherited a way of life. Stories of resilience and strength bubbled to the surface of his mind. His father's words echoed, reminding him of the importance of standing up for what was right. That night was long and restless. Jake tossed and turned, adrenaline coursing through his veins. With every passing hour, he felt the weight of fear and uncertainty tighten around him like a vice. He couldn't do this alone, he needed allies. At first light, determination chased away his dread. Jake slid into his jeans, grabbed his old cap, and jumped into his pickup truck. The engine sputtered to life, an old but loyal companion as he made his way into town. He needed help. The local diner buzzed with morning activity. Familiar faces greeted him as the aroma of fresh coffee and fried eggs wrapped around him like a warm hug. Martha, the widow who lived down the road, waved him over. "Jake, you look like you've seen a ghost." Jake took a deep breath, the weight of their threats heavy on him. "I need your help. A gang of bikers came to claim my farm." The laughter died, replaced by stunned silence. People glanced at each other, their expressions shifting from surprise to solidarity. One by one, they began to speak, their voices rising like a chorus. They had heard the stories, seen the destruction that these bikers could bring. Billy, a burly farmer with hands calloused from years of hard work, shook his head. Jake's heart soared as he witnessed the transformation around him. They weren't just standing for him, they were standing together, united in a common cause. The fear dissipated, replaced by a fierce resolve. Martha leaned in. "What can we do?" Jake felt the heat of determination course through him, the community rallying around him like a fortress. "We need to prepare." As they shared ideas and strategies, the diner buzzed with excitement. The sense of community was igniting a fire inside Jake, one that he hadn't felt in years. They could do this. They had to do this. They spent the day organizing, gathering tools, and reinforcing boundaries. Neighbors brought over old equipment, pitchforks, and even improvised barricades. As the sun dipped below the horizon, golden hues painted the sky. Tension filled the air, a mix of anticipation and anxiety. They had come together, creating a bond forged in the fires of adversity. Jake felt a sense of warmth spread through him. This was more than just about fighting bikers. It was about fighting for a way of life, the traditions that had shaped them. The next day felt surreal. As dawn broke, Jake found himself standing at the edge of his land, looking out over the rows of corn standing like sentinels. Heartened by the support of his neighbors, he steeled himself for the confrontation ahead. Then, like a gathering storm, the roar of motorcycles filled the air once more. Dust kicked up behind them as the gang rolled into view, arrogance radiating from every pore of Bear's being. Jake stood still, his pitchfork gripped tightly in one hand, the other clenched into a fist. Bear taunted as he dismounted, a cruel grin dancing on his lips. Jake stepped forward, his posture straightening as he faced the bikers. "You think you can intimidate me? You've got it all wrong." Bear glanced around, confusion flickering in his eyes for just a moment. They had come expecting fear, but instead they were met with an unwavering spirit. Neighbors stood beside Jake, each face reflecting courage and determination. With a dismissive snort, Bear sneered. "You've got some guts to stand up to us, but you're wasting your time." "No," Jake replied, his voice steady and strong. "This is where it ends for you, not just for me, but for everyone you threaten." The silence hung heavy. Jake could feel the tension crackling in the air, the moment poised for conflict. His neighbors shifted slightly, their presence a solid wall of support behind him. Bear's grin wavered, uncertainty flaring in his eyes as he scanned the row of determined farmers standing firm. "That depends on you," Jake said, his voice unwavering. Bear paused, weighing his options. "You think you can intimidate me?" Jake took a breath, feeling the strength of generations behind him. "We are farmers, yes." Bear's bravado shifted, confusion creeping into his demeanor. The bikers exchanged glances, the bond that once sparkled between them beginning to dull. Jake's heart raced, they were wavering. "Maybe you're right," Bear said slowly, the edge gone from his voice. With that, he motioned for his crew to retreat. Engines roared to life again, the sound vibrating through the ground as the bikers slowly turned away, leaving the scent of gasoline and smoke hanging in the air. Joy surged through Jake as he watched them leave, relief washing over him like a cleansing tide. They had pushed back. They had shown not just the bikers, but each other that they wouldn't back down, that community and resilience were stronger than threats. As the adrenaline began to fade, the reality of their victory sunk in. Neighbors erupted in cheers, hugs and handshakes exchanged as laughter filled the air, ringing out against the backdrop of waving cornfields. Jake felt a surge of gratitude wash over him. They had believed in one another. They had stood together, bound by the land they cherished. The sun hung low in the sky, painting everything in golden light, casting soft shadows across the fields. They gathered together, stories of bravery shared, and laughter blooming like the wildflowers that dotted the edges of the farm. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Jake took a moment to soak it all in. This wasn't just a battle won. It was a testament to the power of unity, the strength found in community, and the everlasting connection to the land. Together, they had pushed back against darkness, and together, they would face whatever came next. Standing in that moment surrounded by friends, laughter, and the rich, vibrant beauty of the land, Jake knew one undeniable truth. They were more than just farmers. They were warriors of the earth, unswerving and fiercely loyal, united against any threat that may come their way. As the sun broke over the horizon, the farm stretched before Jake Thompson like a canvas painted in vibrant colors. Cornfields stood tall, the morning dew sparkling like diamonds. But tranquility shattered when the distant sound of roaring engines cut through the peaceful morning air, vibrating deep within his chest. Jake's heart raced. He squinted down the dusty road, and soon they appeared a gang of bikers, leather jackets flapping in the wind like the wings of ominous birds. He had heard the whispers. They were known to claim territory, leaving a trail of fear behind them. They rode in a tight cluster, a menacing wave of chrome and rubber. The leader barked, waving his hand as they skidded to a halt. His eyes were hidden beneath a visor, but Jake could sense the arrogance radiating from him. This wasn't just a casual ride, they were here for a purpose. Pulling off his sunglasses, the biker stepped forward, revealing a snarling grin. "Hey, old man, we're taking this farm." Laughter erupted from the gang, harsh and mocking. Jake felt a surge of anger. How dare they think they could just come on his land and lay claim? He took a step forward, fists clenched at his sides. "You're not taking anything from me," he replied, voice steady despite the turmoil in his heart. Bear, the lead biker, took a step closer, muscles bulging beneath his leather vest. "You haven't got a choice, old man." Jake could feel the weight of history behind him. His family had worked this land for generations. It wasn't just dirt and crops, it was memories, a legacy. "You don't know who you're messing with," he said, his tone stronger than he felt. "I'll fight for this land." "Ooh," the bikers laughed, their voices a cacophony of intimidation. But their laughter rang hollow, shadows of uncertainty creeping in as they glanced at each other. This wasn't just a farmer standing alone. It was a man standing in defense of everything he held dear. Bear stepped back. "You have until sunset tomorrow to get out." With that, they roared back to life, tires spinning and whipping dust into the air, clouds of dirt enveloping the fields behind them. Jake stood there, his heart pounding like a war drum. He felt the fire of anger simmering within him, but fear was also coiling around his mind. What would happen next? When the dust settled, he returned to his porch, the weight of the threat hanging heavy in the air. This was more than a land dispute. It was about respect, about protecting a legacy written in sweat and hardship. He spent the evening restless, pacing his kitchen and staring out at the fields. Memories flooded back, his father teaching him to plow, showing him the intricacies of sowing seeds and reaping rewards. The old oak tree stood as a sentinel in the yard, witness to laughter, tears, and everything in between. He needed allies. He couldn't face them alone. As night draped its cloak over the landscape, he devised a plan. The morning light would bring hope, and he would seek help from the community that had always stood by him. At dawn, Jake drove into town. The familiar sight of the local diner brought a rush of nostalgia. He parked his truck, heart racing as he entered. The smell of coffee and bacon wafted through the air, mixing with the chatter of locals. Their laughter turned to silence as he approached. Called Martha, a widow with a heart of gold. "We haven't seen you in a while." He hesitated for only a moment, gathering his thoughts. "I need your help. A gang of bikers is trying to take my farm." The silence deepened, faces turning grave as they absorbed what he'd said. Billy, a grizzled farmer, clenched his jaw. "Those bastards think they can do whatever they want." Every eye turned to Jake, a fire beginning to spark. They were not just a group of farmers, they were a community, and they could stand together. Martha leaned in closer, her expression fierce. "I need people. I need my friends to back me up." The tension in the diner faded, replaced by a sense of unity and determination. People began to rally around him, pledging their support. Billy said, "We'll stand by you." That day they worked fast. Farmers from nearby came with tools, pitchforks, and equipment, all while sharing tales of confrontation with the bikers. Each story fueled Jake's resolve. They would not back down, they would fight for their home, their roots intertwined in this land. As the sun began to set that evening, Jake looked out over the fields, the golden light casting long shadows. They worked tirelessly fortifying their defenses. The barn transformed from a storage space into a center of planning, filled with maps, equipment, and strategies. When the sun fell behind the hills, Jake felt a sense of camaraderie unlike any he had ever known. They were family now, bound by not just the land, but by the fight they were preparing to face. The next morning felt charged with energy. As dawn broke, the camaraderie resonated across the land, a powerful force ready to confront the storm that was coming. Jake could feel his pulse quicken as he positioned himself at the edge of the farm, his neighbors lined up behind him. They stood together, resolute. The rumble of motorcycles approached again, unmistakable. The weight of dread mixed with anticipation settled in their hearts. Jake's grip tightened on his pitchfork, sweat trickling down his brow. Bear and his gang roared into view, their bikes scattering gravel and dirt. Jake faced them, standing tall, anchored by the strength of his community. "This is your last chance, old man," Bear taunted, dismounting his bike. "You're still here." Jake stepped forward, unable to mask the fire in his eyes. "I'm not the one making a mistake. You are." Bear laughed, but the laughter rang hollow, uncertainty creeping into his expression. Jake took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the farmers behind him. "You will not have this land," yelled one of the bikers, but the fierce conviction of Jake's neighbors drowned out the noise. "We are not afraid," Jake shouted, his voice carrying over the roar of engines. The bikers exchanged glances, their bravado beginning to wane. Bear shouted back, his voice now tinged with unease. "No," Jake replied steadily. The intensity hung in the air, the moment stretching out like a taut wire ready to snap. The farmers behind Jake stood like a wall, their presence a testament to resilience. Fear began to creep into the expressions of the bikers as they assessed their situation. "Maybe we should just leave," whispered a younger biker, glancing around uncertainly. Bear turned to him, anger flaring. But Jake seized the moment, his voice ringing with confidence. It hit them then. They were cornered. Just as the strength of the farmers shone brightly, the bikers' bravado began to crack, revealing the hesitation that lay beneath. Jake could see Bear's grip slackening, uncertainty washing over his face. "We'll be back," he snarled, but the conviction was gone from his voice. With reluctant gestures, the gang mounted their bikes. As the engines roared back to life, the defeat in their stance became apparent. They didn't want to fight a losing battle. They peeled away down the driveway, dust swirling after them like fading ghosts. Jake exhaled, feeling the tension melt away. Victory coursed through his veins, igniting a joy that filled the air. The farmers erupted into cheers, a euphoric sound of triumph that echoed against the winding hills. They had done it. The strength of their community had pushed back against bullies determined to take what wasn't theirs. Months of hard work, determination, and friendship had culminated in a moment of victory, and the weight of uncertainty lifted from their shoulders. Jake couldn't help but smile as he turned to face his neighbors, gratitude swelling within him. They had come together, fought the good fight, and defended more than just land. They had defended a way of life. As laughter filled the air, stories of bravery were traded like treasures, memories being built onto the foundation of their bond. Underneath the sprawling sky, surrounded by the golden cornfields, life returned to normal. The threat had been temporarily vanquished, and for now the farmers could breathe easy. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting everything in warm tones of orange and pink, Jake thought of his family and the legacy they had built. This farm was home, a sanctuary filled with history, laughter, and the spirit of those who had fought for it before him. But now he was not alone. His neighbors' faces glowed with pride and determination, united not just by land, but by something far deeper, a shared purpose that transcended everything. They had pushed back, proven together that they could stand firm against any storm. As Jake leaned back against the oak tree, the whispers of the leaves wrapped around him like a comforting embrace. He knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. The bikers might return and new challenges might arise, but the spirit of their community would endure, unbreakable and fierce. Here in this moment, surrounded by friends and family, Jake Thompson felt the strength of the land coursing through him. Together, they were not just farmers. They were guardians of their legacy, defenders of their home, and no one would take that away from them. They were a family bound by the roots deep in the earth, determined to face whatever came their way. And that made all the difference. The sound of thunder rolled through the fields, but it wasn't the storm they all feared. No, this was something different. As Jake Thompson stood on his porch, coffee mug gripped tightly in his hands, he felt the vibrations of approaching motorcycle engines. His heart raced. He squinted down the long dirt road, and there they were, a gang of bikers, leather jackets glistening in the sun, roaring like a pack of wolves. Jake had heard the stories. These men were notorious for rolling into towns, claiming territory, and intimidating anyone who dared to stand in their way. This was his land, though, a small farm filled with memories from generations past. He had worked it, nurtured it like a child, and no gang of bikers was going to take that away from him. They advanced toward his property, tires kicking up dust. The lead biker, a hulking figure tattooed from head to toe, pulled off his helmet, revealing a thick beard knit with arrogance. He yelled, voice booming like thunder, "This farm is ours now." Laughter erupted from the gang, a brutal cacophony that hung thick in the air. Anger flared in Jake's chest. He shot back, gripping the porch railing harder. The bikers laughed again, but beneath their bravado lay a flicker of uncertainty. Jake stepped forward, feet planted firmly in the earth, heart pounding but resolute. "This land has been in my family for generations." The lead biker, who introduced himself as Bear, stepped forward. "You're going to regret this. We'll give you until sunset tomorrow to get out." The venom in his voice sent shivers down Jake's spine, but he stood tall, fueled by anger and determination. "Maybe you don't understand," Jake said, voice steady, with a confidence born from years of hard work. "I won't be intimidated." Bear's eyes narrowed, and with a nod, he motioned for the gang to leave. As they roared off down the dirt road, Jake's heart thundered in his chest, but it was fear intermingled with resolve. He wouldn't let them take his home. With nightfall came a restless sleep, nightmares swirling in Jake's mind. What if they returned? What if they came back with more? Those thoughts clawed at him, shadows creeping into every corner of his mind. But as dawn broke, the fire within him ignited anew. He wouldn't let fear win. He grabbed his truck keys and drove into town, a sense of purpose guiding him as he pulled into the familiar parking lot of the diner. The smell of coffee and bacon wrapped around him like a warm hug, but today's atmosphere was different. The usual chatter faded when he entered, and all eyes turned to him. Martha, a local widow who had lived in the area for decades, spotted him first. "Jake, what's wrong?" His mouth felt dry, but he pushed through. "A gang of bikers are trying to take my farm." The words hung in the air, heavy and charged. Gasps rolled through the diner, and a murmur of disbelief followed. Old-timers exchanged concerned glances. A resolve began to spread among the patrons, a distant fire lighting in their eyes. "I need your help," Jake said, glancing around the table. Martha leaned in, fierce determination radiating from her. "We're all in this together, Jake. This land isn't just yours, it belongs to all of us." The energy in the room shifted, filled with solidarity, a feeling that they were more than just individuals. They were a community. "Let's get organized," Jake proposed, the tension in his shoulders easing as hope filled the air. They rallied around him, sharing stories of past struggles against corporate grabs and bullies that tried to dominate their little slice of the world. They began brainstorming strategies, pooling resources, each farmer pulling together everything they could muster. As the sun dipped low, they rallied at Jake's farm, armed with pitchforks, shovels, and an indomitable spirit. The barn transformed into a command center, filled with maps and plans. Neighbors and friends worked alongside Jake, their laughter intermingling with determination as they prepared for the fight to come. The next day dawned bright and crisp, the air electric with anticipation. Jake stood at the edge of his property, flanked by his neighbors, a sea of familiar faces united in purpose. The rumble of engines returned, unmistakable and fierce, as the gang of bikers rolled in once again, their numbers visibly larger this time. Bear dismounted, swaggering toward them, trying to reclaim his dominance. He taunted, smirking. Jake stepped forward, chest out, surrounded by the unwavering power of his community. "You really think this is going to intimidate us? This is our home." Laughter erupted, but it lacked the same bite it once had. Uncertainty wove through the bikers' ranks as Jake tilted his head, challenging them. "It's not just me you have to deal with anymore." Bear's eyes narrowed and he gritted his teeth. "You'll regret this. We're not going to back down." A calm fell over Jake like a blanket. "Yeah, we're farmers." The bikers exchanged glances, the bravado beginning to crack as the gravity of reality settled in. Strength of their numbers was tested by the sheer resolve of the farmers standing beside Jake, each friend a pillar of strength. "Maybe we should just leave," one of the younger bikers suggested, voice trembling slightly. Bear's expression darkened. "Shut up." He seemed to be losing control, and the tension in the air thickened. The farmers stood firm, a united front, refusing to flinch. They could feel the momentum shifting in their favor, a powerful tide rising against the bikers' arrogance. Jake shouted. His words hung in the air like a challenge, echoing through the tense silence. Could they really push back against the bikers? The gang shifted, doubt creeping into their demeanor as they took stock of the unwavering farmers surrounding Jake. Bear clenched his fists, a flicker of fear showing for just a moment. Jake didn't hesitate. "We're ready for you. We're not afraid to defend our home." With every beat of his heart, Jake felt the power of his community behind him. The bikers were losing their hold, their confidence unraveling before the strength of unity. "We'll come back," Bear spat, his voice shaky. But even his words felt weak and empty as he turned toward the bikes, his crew hesitating, uncertainty painted on their faces. Jake watched as they mounted their bikes, engines sputtering violently before they finally revved them back to life. The wheels kicked up dirt and dust, fading into the distance, and the farmers erupted into cheers. They had done it. They had stood their ground and pushed back against the threat, driven by the shared conviction that the land belonged to them. Martha turned, beaming at Jake, her eyes glistening with pride. In that moment, the victory felt sweeter than imaginable. They had reclaimed not just the land, but a sense of hope and belonging that tightened the bonds between them. The challenge had united them, friends, families, neighbors, all standing as one against the tide of intimidation. Jake looked out across the rolling fields, taking a deep breath of the familiar scent of the earth. a renewed sense of purpose washing over him. Together, they had faced the storm and emerged victorious. As night settled over the farm, a feeling of warmth enveloped him. The stars twinkled above, and laughter mingled with the sounds of celebration filling the air. Stories were exchanged, tales of their struggle beautifully crafted into the fabric of their shared history. They had fought for something real for their place in the world, and they'd done so together. The future remained uncertain, but as Jake stood with his neighbors, a fierce determination settled within him. They could face any storm, defend any territory, and together they would safeguard the land that meant so much. This wasn't just a farm. It was their home, a sanctuary woven with memories, laughter, and the spirit of resilience. And nothing would ever change that. They were farmers, sure, but they were also warriors, fiercely protective of what they held dear. And in that beautiful unity, Jake felt an overwhelming sense of peace. No one could take that away from them. The fight had bound them all, ensuring that the spirit of courage would live on in every blade of grass and every ear of corn swaying gently in the breeze. As they celebrated the night away, the warmth of community wrapped around him like a protective embrace. Sure, here's the long-form script you requested. The sound of thunder rolled through the fields, but it wasn't the storm they all feared. No, this was something different. As Jake Thompson stood on his porch, coffee mug gripped tightly in his hands, he felt the vibrations of approaching motorcycle engines. His heart raced. He squinted down the long dirt road, and there they were, a gang of bikers, leather jackets glistening in the sun, roaring like a pack of wolves. Jake had heard the stories. These men were notorious for rolling into towns, claiming territory, and intimidating anyone who dared to stand in their way. This was his land, though, a small farm filled with memories from generations past. He had worked it, nurtured it like a child, and no gang of bikers was going to take that away from him. They advanced toward his property, tires kicking up dust. The lead biker, a hulking figure tattooed from head to toe, pulled off his helmet, revealing a thick beard knit with arrogance. He yelled, voice booming like thunder, "This farm is ours now." Laughter erupted from the gang, a brutal cacophony that hung thick in the air. Anger flared in Jake's chest. He shot back, gripping the porch railing harder. The bikers laughed again, but beneath their bravado lay a flicker of uncertainty. Jake stepped forward, feet planted firmly in the earth, heart pounding but resolute. "This land has been in my family for generations." The lead biker, who introduced himself as Bear, stepped closer. "You're going to regret this. We'll give you until sunset tomorrow to get out." The venom in his voice sent shivers down Jake's spine, but he stood tall, fueled by anger and determination. "Maybe you don't understand," Jake said, voice steady, with a confidence born from years of hard work. "I won't be intimidated." Bear's eyes narrowed, and with a nod, he motioned for the gang to leave. As they roared off down the dirt road, Jake's heart thundered in his chest, but it was fear intermingled with resolve. He wouldn't let them take his home. With nightfall came a restless sleep, nightmares swirling in Jake's mind. What if they returned? What if they came back with more? Those thoughts clawed at him, shadows creeping into every corner of his mind. But as dawn broke, the fire within him ignited anew. He wouldn't let fear win. He grabbed his truck keys and drove into town, a sense of purpose guiding him as he pulled into the familiar parking lot of the diner. The smell of coffee and bacon wrapped around him like a warm hug, but today's atmosphere was different. The usual chatter faded when he entered, and all eyes turned to him. Martha, a local widow who had lived in the area for decades, spotted him first. "Jake, what's wrong?" His mouth felt dry, but he pushed through. "A gang of bikers are trying to take my farm." The words hung in the air, heavy and charged. Gasps rolled through the diner, and a murmur of disbelief followed. Old-timers exchanged concerned glances. A resolve began to spread among the patrons, a distant fire lighting in their eyes. "I need your help," Jake said, glancing around the table. Martha leaned in, fierce determination radiating from her. "We're all in this together, Jake. This land isn't just yours, it belongs to all of us." The energy in the room shifted, filled with solidarity, a feeling that they were more than just individuals. They were a community. "Let's get organized," Jake proposed, the tension in his shoulders easing as hope filled the air. They rallied around him, sharing stories of past struggles against corporate grabs and bullies that tried to dominate their little slice of the world. They began brainstorming strategies, pooling resources, each farmer pulling together everything they could muster. As the sun began to set that evening, Jake looked out over the fields, the golden light casting long shadows. They worked tirelessly fortifying their defenses. The barn transformed from a storage space into a center of planning, filled with maps, equipment, and strategies. When the sun fell behind the hills, Jake felt a sense of camaraderie unlike any he had ever known. They were family now, bound by not just the land but by the fight they were preparing to face. The next day dawned bright and crisp, the air electric with anticipation. Jake stood at the edge of his property, flanked by his neighbors, a sea of familiar faces united in purpose. The rumble of engines approached again, unmistakable and fierce, as the gang of bikers rolled in once again, their numbers visibly larger this time. Bear dismounted, swaggering toward them, trying to reclaim his dominance. He taunted, smirking. Jake stepped forward, chest out, surrounded by the unwavering power of his community. "You really think this is going to intimidate us? This is our home." Laughter erupted, but it lacked the same bite it once had. Uncertainty wove through the bikers' ranks as Jake tilted his head, challenging them. "It's not just me you have to deal with anymore." Bear's eyes narrowed and he gritted his teeth. "You'll regret this. We're not going to back down." A calm fell over Jake like a blanket. "Yeah, we're farmers." The bikers exchanged glances, the bravado beginning to crack as the gravity of reality settled in. The strength of their numbers was tested by the sheer resolve of the farmers standing beside Jake, each friend a pillar of strength. "Maybe we should just leave," one of the younger bikers suggested, voice trembling slightly. Bear's expression darkened. "Shut up." He seemed to be losing control, and the tension in the air thickened. The farmers stood firm, a united front, refusing to flinch. They could feel the momentum shifting in their favor, a powerful tide rising against the bikers' arrogance. Jake shouted. His words hung in the air like a challenge, echoing through the tense silence. Could they really push back against the bikers? The gang shifted, doubt creeping into their demeanor as they took stock of the unwavering farmers surrounding Jake. Bear clenched his fists, a flicker of fear showing for just a moment. Jake didn't hesitate. "We're ready for you. We're not afraid to defend our home." With every beat of his heart, Jake felt the power of his community behind him. The bikers were losing their hold, their confidence unraveling before the strength of unity. "We'll come back," Bear spat, his voice shaky. But even his words felt weak and empty as he turned toward the bikes, his crew hesitating, uncertainty painted on their faces. Jake watched as they mounted their bikes, engines sputtering violently before they finally revved them back to life. The wheels kicked up dirt and dust, fading into the distance, and the farmers erupted into cheers. They had done it. They had stood their ground and pushed back against the threat, driven by the shared conviction that the land belonged to them. Martha turned, beaming at Jake, her eyes glistening with pride. In that moment, the victory felt sweeter than imaginable. They had reclaimed not just the land, but a sense of hope and belonging that tightened the bonds between them. The challenge had united them, friends, families, neighbors, all standing as one against the tide of intimidation. Jake looked out across the rolling fields, taking a deep breath of the familiar scent of the earth, a renewed sense of purpose washing over him. Together, they had faced the storm and emerged victorious. As night settled over the farm, a feeling of warmth enveloped him. The stars twinkled above, and laughter mingled with the sounds of celebration filling the air. Stories were exchanged, tales of their struggle beautifully crafted into the fabric of their shared history. They had fought for something real, for their place in the world, and they'd done so together. The future remained uncertain, but as Jake stood with his neighbors, a fierce determination settled within him. They could face any storm, defend any territory, and together they would safeguard the land that meant so much. This wasn't just a farm. It was their home, a sanctuary woven with memories, laughter, and the spirit of resilience. And nothing would ever change that. They were farmers, sure, but they were also warriors, fiercely protective of what they held dear. And in that beautiful unity, Jake felt an overwhelming sense of peace. No one could take that away from them. The fight had bound them all. ensuring that the spirit of courage would live on in every blade of grass and every ear of corn swaying gently in the breeze. As they celebrated the night away, the warmth of community wrapped around him like a protective embrace. Together, they had pushed back against the darkness and emerged victorious, forever changed and united by the battle fought for the love of home. Feel free to adjust any portions as needed. The sun had barely peeked over the horizon, casting long shadows across the sprawling cornfields when the low rumble of engines pierced the stillness of the morning air. Jake Thompson felt the vibrations deep in his bones as he leaned against the porch railing, coffee steaming in his hand. A storm was coming, he thought, but it wasn't the kind that would bring rain. His heart raced as he squinted down the dirt road. A gang of bikers came into view, a sight he had only seen in the whispered rumors passed around town. They roared into the yard, scattering gravel like confetti. The lead biker, a massive figure with a grim face and tattoos crawling like vipers across his arms, swung off his bike. Jake's stomach twisted at the sight of the leather-clad men who stood shoulder to shoulder, a living wall of intimidation. The lead biker shouted, his voice rich with menace. "This land is ours now." Jake blinked, jaw tightening. His father's farm, had been in the family for generations. It was more than fields growing corn and soybeans. It was home, family. He squared his shoulders, heart pounding like a drum. The bikers erupted into laughter, a loud, harsh sound that echoed against the tranquil backdrop of the land. Bear, the leader, stepped forward, a smirk stretching across his rugged face. "You really think you're going to stop us? We'll give you until sundown tomorrow. After that, well, try me," Jake shot back, fists clenching at his sides. He felt a rush of adrenaline, fear mixing with something fiercer, a determination rooted deep within him, forged through years of hard work and sweat. "You think you intimidate me? This land is my legacy." Bear's laughter died for just a moment, surprise flickering in his eyes, but it quickly shifted back to arrogance as he motioned for his crew to mount their bikes. With a deafening roar, they tore away down the road. Dust swirled in their wake like ghosts retreating into the night. Jake stood frozen for a moment, heart racing. The weight of their threat hung heavy, pressing down on him. After generations of toil and sacrifice, a crew of miscreants had rolled in, ready to snatch everything away. He turned back towards the farm, thoughts swirling. He knew he had to act quickly. The night was long and restless, filled with unease as Jake paced his small kitchen, the shadows stretching along the walls. He began to think about everything his family had faced: droughts, floods, loss, and how they had all fought to persist. Every inch of the land bore the stories of those who had toiled before him. He wouldn't let it end now. As dawn crept over the horizon, Jake hopped into his tired pickup truck and drove into town. The engine sputtered, but it roared back to life, carrying him the short distance to the diner. The smell of fresh coffee and bacon greeted him, but today the usual warmth felt distant, fraught with tension. Few words were exchanged as he pushed through the door, the chatter dying down like flickering candle flames. The locals turned to him, eyes filled with concern. Martha, the town's unofficial matriarch, spoke up first. "Jake, what's wrong?" "A gang of bikers is coming for my farm," he confessed, voice tight. "They threatened me." Shock rippled through the diners. Billy, a grizzled farmer with decades etched into his face, slammed his fist on the table. "Those punks think they can just roll in here and take what's ours." The mood shifted. Acceptance, solidarity, and an unspoken understanding filled the space like warmth pouring from a hearth. Martha asked, her eyes fierce and unwavering. Jake took a deep breath, feeling strength swell within. "We need to organize. We can't let them intimidate us." They began to plan. Stories were shared of past fights against corporate interests, common bullies, and everything they had done to keep their farms alive. Laughter spilled into the room, mingling with ideas. Jake felt hope ignite in his chest. Every friendly face was a promise, a pact forged in the spirit of community. The draw of camaraderie wrapped around him like a cloak, and he smiled for the first time since Bear's threat. By the time the sun started to set, the diner buzzed with energy. They hadn't just started a plan, they had ignited a movement. As they piled into their cars and pickups, ready to fortify the farm, Jake felt a renewed sense of determination swell within him. That evening, they worked tirelessly. Armed with pitchforks, tools, and ingenuity, they transformed the barn into a strategic headquarters. Maps lay spread out over long tables, and voices merged into a symphony of plans. Each neighbor brought something unique to the table, a part of the puzzle that would strengthen their resolve. Jake's heart swelled as he looked around. This was it. This was the spirit of the community, woven together in the face of adversity. Not just protecting his land, but the land they all shared and loved. As the last rays of sun dipped beyond the horizon, a sense of togetherness filled the air, electric and vibrant. Jake gathered everyone around the old oak tree, the most sacred part of the farm, and spoke with fervor. "This is our home." Cheers erupted, filling the night sky. Hope surged through their ranks, each member feeling a fierce connection. The sense of unity was palpable, binding them in a shared purpose. The following morning dawned bright and crisp. Jake stood at the edge of his property, feeling the sun's warmth on his skin, invigorated by the strength of his neighbors. The sound of rumbling engines returned, foreboding and familiar. He knew in his gut that the bikers were coming back. As Bear and his contingent of leather-clad men appeared once again, the tension thickened in the air. They rolled up, a fearsome sight, and Jake could see Bear's eyes scanning the gathered farmers. He called out, trying to mask his uncertainty with bravado. Jake stepped forward, your heart pounding in his chest, surrounded by an unyielding wall of support from his friends. "You really think you can intimidate us? This is our home." Bear laughed, but it fell flat, the fear simmering just beneath the surface. "You'll regret standing against us." Jake felt the strength of the community behind him, a tidal wave of determination that wouldn't be shaken. "We've faced worse than you." More bikers stepped forward, their confidence wavering, and Jake saw the uncertainty in their eyes. They were used to taking without paying the price, and he offered them a challenge they had never expected. Bear snapped his fingers, rage boiling inside him. Before Jake could respond, a younger biker hesitated and said, "What if we just leave them alone?" The gang turned at this. Bear's expression shifted from anger to disbelief. "You don't get to decide." But the younger man seemed to stand firm, the fear creeping into the circle. "I'm tired of this. Maybe they're right." Jake felt the moment shift like a tide, and the other bikers exchanged looks of doubt. The wind began to pick up as uncertainty rippled through their ranks. Bear shouted, struggling to regain control, "We'll come back." As they prepared to leave, a surge of triumph filled Jake's heart, electric and wild. The bikers began to retreat, roaring off down the dirt road, the sound fading into the distance. But before Jake could relish in their victory, a new sound echoed in the distance. A rival rumble built a chorus of engines approaching from another direction. A wave of dread washed over him as he turned toward the sound. More bikers appeared, not just the same gang. This was a different crew entirely, larger and more intimidating. They raced toward the farm, engines roaring with a promise of chaos. Jake thought. There was a new fear rising among his neighbors, the solidarity they felt just moments ago beginning to falter. The fight wasn't over, it was only just beginning. As the new gang bore down on them, ready to claim the land they had fought so hard to protect, Jake's heart sank. Would they have the strength to face this new challenge? Or were they about to lose everything? In that decisive moment, the air crackled with suspense, and Jake could feel the weight of uncertainty settle on his shoulders. The line had been drawn, and as the motorcycles approached, he knew nothing would ever be the same again. Would he stand firm, or would they be overwhelmed? Choices had to be made, and the fate of the farm hung in the air like a fragile thread, ready to snap. Jake took a deep breath, ready to face the approach of an unpredictable storm that could change everything he fought for. The farm stood as a silent witness, the sun slipping behind thick clouds as the sound of engines filled the air. And in that moment, everything hinged on a decision that could alter their lives forever.